Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his hands as he stood outside the small chapel on New Haven Colony. The building was nothing fancy, just metal walls and a simple roof, but it would do for what needed to happen today. He was about to marry. Zaravelthic in his stomach felt like it was full of jumping insects. The other colonists had filled the chapel. Most of them were humans who had come to New Haven looking for a fresh start, but there were also a few other aliens who had made the frontier world their home. Jake could see Commander Lisa Grant sitting in the front row, still wearing her Colonial Defense Force uniform. Even on this special day, Jake had met Zara 6 months ago when her refugee ship landed on New Haven. The Catharians were tall and thin, with blue-gray skin and large dark eyes. Zara was different from the other refugees, though. She carried herself like a soldier. There was something sad in her eyes that made Jake want to help her. The chapel door opened and Zara walked in. She wore a simple white dress that the human women in the colony had helped her make. Her long dark hair was braided with small silver beads that caught the light. Jake felt his heart speed up when she smiled at him. The ceremony was short and simple. Pastor Williams, who also ran the colony's supply depot, spoke about love and new beginnings. Jake and Zara exchanged simple gold rings that had been made in the colony's small workshop. When Pastor Williams told Jake he could kiss his bride, Jake felt like the luckiest man in the galaxy. After the ceremony, the colonists threw a party in the community hall. There was music and dancing and plenty of food. Jake watched Zara try to learn human dances, laughing when she got the steps wrong. For the first time since he had known her, she looked truly happy. As the night got late, Jake and Zara walked. To their new home together was a small prefab house on the edge of the colony, with 2 rooms and a tiny kitchen. Jake had spent weeks fixing it up and making it perfect for them both. Inside their bedroom, Zara sat on the edge of the bed and looked nervous. She had been quiet during the walk home, and Jake wondered if she was having second thoughts about marrying him. She said quietly, "There is something I must give you. Something important." She stood up and walked to a metal chest in the corner of the room. Jake had seen the chest before, but had never asked what was inside. Zara had brought it with her when she came to New Haven, and it seemed to be one of the few things she had saved from her old life. Zara opened the chest and pulled out something wrapped in dark cloth. She held it carefully like it was made of glass. Her hands were shaking a little as she unwrapped it. Inside the cloth was a sword. But it was not like any sword Jake had ever seen. It was about 3 feet long and made of some kind of metal that seemed to glow with its own light. The handle was wrapped in dark leather, and there were strange symbols carved along the blade. When Zara held it up, the metal seemed to hum softly. "This sword belonged to my first husband," Zara said, her voice thick with emotion. "His name was Keth Velthak, and he was the bravest warrior our people ever knew. He died defending our world when the Ravagers came." Jake looked at the sword, and then at Zara. He could see tears in her large dark eyes. "Zara, I can't take this. It belonged to your husband. It should stay with you." Zara shook her head. "No, Jake. Keth always said this sword was special. He found it in the old ruins on our world, and from the moment he touched it, he said it. Sang to him. But he also said something else. He said the sword was waiting for its true owner, and that owner was not him." She held the sword out to Jake. "Keth said the sword would know when it found the right person. He said it would sing differently for them. I want you to touch it, Jake. Please." Jake looked at the glowing blade. It was beautiful, but it also made him nervous. He had never been much of a fighter. Back on Earth, he had been an engineer who fixed machines and built things. But Zara was looking at him with such hope in her eyes that he could not say no. Slowly, Jake reached out and wrapped his fingers around the handle of the sword. The moment his skin touched the leather grip, everything changed. The soft humming became louder, and the glow from the blade got brighter. But more than that, Jake could feel something in his mind. It was like the sword was talking to him, but not with words. Images flashed in his head, battles in space, strange worlds, and warriors fighting with weapons that looked like the one he was holding. "Jake," Zara gasped. "Look at the blade." Jake looked down and saw that symbols were appearing on the metal. But these were not the same symbols that had been carved there before. These were different, and somehow Jake could understand what they meant. They were numbers and letters that looked almost like the military codes he had learned during his brief time in Earth's colonial service. The sword felt perfect in his hand, like it had been made just for him. It was not heavy at all, and when he moved it through the air, it seemed to know where he wanted it to go before he did. "I have never seen it do that before," Zara whispered. "Even with Keth, it never showed those symbols." "What do they mean?" Jake stared at the blade, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The codes looked familiar, but he could not remember where he had seen them before. "I'm not sure," he said slowly, "but I think they're human." Zara's eyes went wide. "Human? That's impossible. This sword is ancient. My people have guarded it for hundreds of years." Before Jake could answer, there was a loud beeping sound from outside their house. It was the emergency signal that meant trouble was coming to New Haven Colony. Jake set the sword down carefully and ran to the window. In the sky above the colony, red lights were flashing. Ships were coming down from orbit, and they did not look friendly. The red lights in the sky turned out to be Colonial Defense Force ships, not enemies. Jake felt his heart slow down as he watched the familiar shapes of human vessels landing at the colony's small spaceport. Commander Lisa Grant's voice came over the colony's communication system, telling everyone to stay calm and return to their homes. Jake picked up the sword again, and once more, the strange symbols appeared on its blade. The metal felt warm in his hands, and he could swear he heard something like music coming from deep inside the weapon. Zara watched him with curious eyes. "We should tell Commander Grant about this," Jake said, but Zara shook her head quickly. "Not yet," she said. "First, we need to understand what it means. Keth always said the sword had secrets, but he never told me what they were. He said I would know when the time was right." The next morning, Jake went to work at the colony's engineering center as usual, but he could not stop thinking about the sword. He kept the weapon hidden in his tool locker, wrapped in the same dark cloth Zara had used. Every few hours, he would touch it just to make sure it was real. During his lunch break, Jake decided to take the sword to the colony's computer center. Maybe the symbols on the blade could be scanned and translated. The computer technician, a young woman named Amy Clark, was happy to help. "This is interesting," Amy said as she ran the scanner over the sword's blade. "The symbols look like they're made of some kind of energy, not carved into the metal. And look at this. They're changing even as I scan them." Jake watched the computer screen as Amy worked. The symbols did seem to shift and move like they were alive, but some of them stayed the same, and those looked more familiar each time Jake saw them. "Can you run these through the military database?" Jake asked. They looked like service codes from Earth's colonial fleet. Amy typed commands into her computer. After a few minutes, she sat back with a surprised look on her face. "Jake, you're right. These are definitely military codes. But they're old. Really old. Like 200 years old." 200 years. Jake leaned closer to the screen. "That would be from the first wave of colony ships that left Earth." "Exactly. And look at this." Amy pointed to a line of code on the screen. "This identifier belongs to the CSF Meridian. That was one of the ships in the first expansion fleet. It disappeared somewhere in this sector about 200 years ago." Jake felt cold all over. Disappeared. What happened to it? Nobody knows. The Meridian was carrying some of Earth's best scientists and engineers. They were supposed to establish a research station on the edge of human space, but they never made it. The ship just vanished. That evening, Jake showed Zara what Amy had discovered. They sat in their small living room with the sword between them on the table. The weapon glowed softly in the dim light. "The Meridian," Zara said quietly. "Keth mentioned that name once. He said it was important, but he never explained why." "There's more," Jake said. "I asked Elder Blackwood about it. He's the oldest human on New Haven, and he remembers stories from the early colony days." Elder Thorne Blackwood was nearly 90 years old, but his mind was still sharp. He had been one of the first people to settle on New Haven, and he knew more about the colony's history than anyone else. Jake had found him in the community center playing cards with some of the other older colonists. "The Meridian," Elder Blackwood had said when Jake asked about the ship. "Now that's a name I haven't heard in a long time. My grandfather served on one of the escort ships that was supposed to meet the Meridian at the research station. He waited for months, but the ship never showed up. Elder Blackwood had leaned forward, his old eyes bright with memory. My grandfather always said the Meridian was carrying something special. Not just scientists and equipment, but weapons. New kinds of weapons that could think for themselves and help their users fight better. What kind of weapons? Jake had asked. Swords, Elder Blackwood had said. Plasma swords that could link to a person's mind and make them better warriors. My grandfather called them ghost blades because they seemed to have spirits inside them. Now sitting in his living room with Zara, Jake told her everything Elder Blackwood had said. The old man had also mentioned that the Meridian had been lost while trying to help defend an alien world from raiders. Raiders, Zara repeated, and Jake saw her face go pale. The Ravagers. They're the ones who destroyed my world too. People have been fighting the Ravagers for a long time, Jake asked. Zara nodded. For generations. My people, the Catherians, were guardians. We protected special places, ancient sites where powerful weapons were hidden. Keth was one of the last guardian warriors. She touched the sword gently. Now I understand why Keth found this weapon in the ruins. It wasn't a Catherian sword at all. It was human, one of the weapons from the Meridian. Jake picked up the sword, and again the symbols appeared on its blade. But this time, he thought he could read some of them. They were definitely military codes, but they were also something more. They were like a map showing locations of other weapons. They're places where the Meridian's crew had hidden their special swords. Zara, Jake said slowly, I think the Meridian didn't just disappear. I think it was destroyed while trying to help your people fight the Ravagers. And before the ship was lost, the crew hid their weapons where they hoped other humans would find them someday. Zara's eyes filled with tears. Keth always said the sword was waiting for its true people. He meant humans, didn't he? The weapons were made by humans for humans. Before Jake could answer, the emergency alarm sounded again. This time, it was not Colonial Defense Force ships in the sky. Through their window, Jake could see dark shapes moving between the stars. Ships that looked like nothing he had ever seen before. Commander Grant's voice came over the colony's speakers, but now she sounded worried. All colonists report to emergency shelters immediately. We have unknown ships approaching. This is not a drill. Jake grabbed the sword and took Zara's hand. As they ran toward the emergency shelter, he noticed that the weapon in his hand was glowing brighter than ever. It was warm against his palm, and he could feel something like excitement coming from it. The sword knew what was coming. And somehow, Jake knew too. The Ravagers had found New Haven. The emergency shelter was crowded and hot. Nearly 300 colonists packed into a space meant for half that many people. Children cried while their parents tried to keep them quiet. Jake sat on the floor with Zara, the sword hidden under his jacket. Through the thick concrete walls, they could hear the sound of explosions in the distance. Commander Grant stood at the front of the shelter, trying to keep everyone calm. Her radio crackled with reports from the Colonial Defense Force ships in orbit. Jake could only catch pieces of what was being said, but none of it sounded good. Unknown ships are attacking our orbital stations, Grant announced to the crowd. Our ships are fighting back, but we're outnumbered. Everyone needs to stay here until we know it's safe. Elder Blackwood made his way through the crowd to where Jake and Zara were sitting. The old man's face was grim. Jake, I need to talk to you, he said quietly. Bring the sword. Jake looked around nervously, but everyone else was focused on Commander Grant's radio reports. He followed Elder Blackwood to a quiet corner of the shelter, with Zara close behind. The ship's attacking us, Elder Blackwood whispered. They match descriptions my grandfather gave me of Ravager vessels. It's dark hulls, no lights, and they fight like they're not afraid to die. How can you be sure? Jake asked. 'Cause I've seen them before, Elder Blackwood said. 40 years ago, they attacked the mining colony on Kepler 7. I was a young soldier then, part of the rescue mission. By the time we got there, everyone was dead or taken. The sword under Jake's jacket was getting warmer. He could feel it, humming against his chest like a living thing. What do the Ravagers want? They take everything, Elder Blackwood said. People, technology, weapons. But your grandfather's journal mentioned something else. The Ravagers were always looking for specific things. Ancient weapons. Weapons like the one you're carrying. A loud crash echoed through the shelter as something hit the building above them. Dust fell from the ceiling, and several people screamed. Commander Grant shouted orders into her radio, but Jake could tell from her voice that things were getting worse. "The shelter won't protect us if they want to get in," Elder Blackwood said. "Jake, that sword of yours might be our only chance. My grandfather wrote that the ghost blades could do amazing things when humans used them properly." Jake pulled the sword from under his jacket. Even in the dim light of the shelter, it glowed like a small sun. Several colonists nearby stopped talking and stared at the weapon with wide eyes. "I don't know how to use it," Jake said. "I'm an engineer, not a warrior." "The sword will teach you," Zara said quietly. "Keth told me that the weapons were made. To help their users learn, you just have to trust it." Another explosion shook the building. This one was much closer, and the lights in the shelter went out. In the darkness, Jake's sword was the only source of light. Its glow showed frightened faces all around them. Commander Grant's voice cut through the darkness. "The Ravagers have broken through our orbital defenses. They're landing troops in the colony. All security personnel, prepare for ground combat." Jake stood up, still holding the sword. The weapon felt perfect in his hands, like it belonged there. Images flashed in his mind, not his own memories, but something else. He saw men and women in strange uniforms fighting with weapons just like his. He saw space battles and burning cities and warriors who never gave up. "I have to go out there," Jake said. "No," Zara grabbed his arm. "You'll be killed. You don't know how to fight." But Jake was already moving toward the shelter's exit. The sword seemed to be pulling him forward. He could feel knowledge flowing into his mind from the weapon.
Ow!
To hold it properly, how to move, how to strike. It was like learning to ride a bicycle. Once his body understood, it felt natural. "Wait," Commander Grant called after him, but he was already at the door. Jake pushed open the heavy steel door and stepped outside. The colony was burning. Several buildings were on fire, and he could see dark shapes moving through the smoke. The Ravagers were tall and thin, wearing black armor that seemed to absorb light. They carried strange weapons that fired bolts of red energy. The moment Jake stepped into the open, 3 Ravagers turned toward him. They raised their weapons, but Jake was already moving. The sword in his hands blazed with white light as he ran toward them. The first Ravager fired at Jake, but somehow he knew the shot was coming. He ducked to the left without thinking about it, and the energy bolt passed harmlessly over his head. The sword cut through the alien's weapon like it was made of paper, and through the alien itself. The second Ravager tried to grab Jake with long black claws, but Jake spun away from the attack. The sword moved in his hands like it had a mind of its own, cutting through the alien's armor and dropping it to the ground. The third Ravager was smarter. It jumped back and called for help in a language that sounded like grinding metal. More dark shapes came running through the smoke toward Jake, but Jake was no longer thinking like an engineer. The sword was showing him things, battle tactics, fighting moves, ways to use the environment around him. He grabbed a piece of burning wood from a destroyed building and threw it at one Ravager. Then used the distraction to attack another. The sword cut through everything the Ravagers had. Their armor, their weapons, even their energy shields were useless against the glowing blade. But more importantly, Jake found that he could predict what they were going to do before they did it. The sword was reading their movements and feeding the information directly into his mind. Within minutes, a dozen Ravagers lay dead around Jake. He stood in the middle of the burning colony, holding the sword high. Its light pushed back the darkness and smoke like a beacon. Other colonists came out of hiding when they saw what Jake had done. Some of them were security personnel with regular weapons, but they all stared at Jake, like he was someone completely different from the quiet engineer they had known. Commander Grant ran up to Jake, your eyes wide with amazement. "How did you do that? Those things killed half my security team, and you just cut through them like they were nothing." Jake looked down at the sword in his hands. The symbols on its blade were brighter now, and he could read them clearly. They were tactical information, enemy positions, weak points in Ravager armor, optimal attack patterns. The weapon was teaching him everything he needed to know. "The sword," Jake said simply. "It's been waiting 200 years for someone to use it properly." But even as he spoke, Jake could see more Ravager ships landing in the distance. What he had fought was just a scouting party. The real attack was just beginning. 3 days after the first Ravager attack, Captain Ryan Hayes arrived at New Haven with his ship, the Terra Nova. Jake watched from the colony's rebuilt command center as the sleek, colonial defense vessel landed at the spaceport Hayes brought. News that made everyone in the room go quiet. It's happening all across human space, Hayes told Commander Grant and the other colony leaders. Weapons just like yours are waking up. But most of the people who try to use them end up in medical wards. Jake sat at the table with the sword lying in front of him. Even when he wasn't holding it, he could feel its presence in his mind. It was like having a wise old teacher sitting on his shoulder, always ready to share knowledge when he needed it. "What do you mean, medical wards?" Jake asked. Hayes pulled out a datapad and showed them pictures of human soldiers lying unconscious. In hospital beds, the weapons link directly to the user's brain. Most people can't handle the information flow. Their minds just shut down from overload. Elder Blackwood leaned forward in his chair. "But Jake can use his sword just fine. What makes him different?" "That's what we're trying to figure out," Hayes said. "So far, we've found only 12 humans who can use these weapons without getting hurt. All of them are engineers or people who work with complex systems." Zara spoke up from where she sat beside Jake. "Keth used to say that the sword could tell what kind of person was holding it. Maybe it only works for people who think in certain ways." Jake picked up his sword and felt the familiar warmth spread through his hands. It's like the weapon is alive, not really alive, but smart. It learns how I think and then helps me fight better. "The AI systems on these weapons are beyond anything we've ever seen," Hayes said. "Our scientists think they might have been created using technology that we've lost."
Ow.
The Meridian was carrying some of the best minds Earth had to offer.
Ow, with that.
Night, Jake sat alone in his house, holding the sword and trying to understand what was happening to him. The weapon showed him flashes of memory that weren't his own. He saw the crew of the Meridian working in laboratories, creating weapons that could bond with human minds. He saw their ship under attack by dark vessels that looked exactly like the ones that had attacked New Haven. But the clearest vision was of a woman in a captain's uniform, standing on the bridge of the Meridian as explosions rocked the ship around. She was giving orders to scatter the weapons across different worlds, to hide them where humans might find them someday. "We won't let them have our technology," the captain said in the vision. "Scatter the ghost blades, hide them with people who understand honor and courage. Someday, humans will need these weapons to finish what we started." Jake blinked and found himself back in his own living room. Now he understood something important. The Meridian hadn't just been destroyed by accident, the crew had sacrificed their ship to stop the Ravagers from getting the weapons. The next morning, Jake found Zara in their small garden behind the house. She was tending to the earth vegetables they had planted together, but he could see tears on her face. "What's wrong?" Jake asked, sitting down beside her. "I've been having dreams," Zara said quietly. "Dreams about Keth and the last battle on our world. They feel too real to be just dreams." Jake took her hand. "Tell me about them." Zara wiped her eyes and looked at him. "In the dreams, I can see what Keth saw during the final battle. The Ravagers weren't just trying to conquer our world. They were looking for something specific. They had maps and scanners, and they were searching the ancient ruins where Keth found your sword. They were looking for more weapons. Yes, but not just any weapons. They kept asking our people about human artifacts. They wanted to know if we had ever found anything made by humans." Jake felt cold, despite the warm morning sun. "The Ravagers know about the Meridian weapons. They've been hunting for them?" Zara nodded. Keth realized it near the end. That's why he hid the sword so well. He knew that if the Ravagers found it, they would be able to track down all the other weapons too. That afternoon, Elder Blackwood came to visit Jake and Zara. The old man looked tired, like he hadn't been sleeping well. "I've been reading my grandfather's journal again," Blackwood said. "There are things in there I never paid attention to before. Things about the Meridian and why it was really built." Jake offered the old man a chair and some water. "Right. What kind of things?" The Meridian wasn't just a research ship, Blackwood said. It was Earth's answer to a threat that most people didn't even know existed. My grandfather wrote that Earth's leaders had received warnings about something called the Ravager Horde, an enemy that consumed entire civilizations. Warnings from who? Zara asked. From other alien races that had survived Ravager attacks. They told Earth that the Ravagers always looked for the same things when they conquered a world. Advanced weapons, tactical knowledge, anything that could make them stronger. Elder Blackwood pulled out his grandfather's old journal and opened it to a page covered with faded handwriting. But they also said that the Ravagers had one weakness. They couldn't understand how humans fought. Human tactics were too unpredictable, too creative. Jake looked at the sword lying on the table. So the Meridian weapons were designed to make human fighters even more unpredictable. Exactly. The weapons don't just make you stronger or faster. They amplify the way humans naturally think during combat. They make you more adaptable, more creative. Elder Blackwood turned to another page in the journal. My grandfather wrote that the Ravagers had conquered dozens of alien races, but they had never faced humans in a real war. The crew of the Meridian was supposed to establish a forward base and prepare for that war. But they never got the chance. Jake said, no, they didn't. But they managed to hide their weapons before they died. And now those weapons are waking up just as the Ravagers are making their move into human space. Captain Hayes contacted them that evening with more news. 3 more colonies had been attacked by Ravager forces, and in each case, humans with Meridian weapons had been able to fight back successfully. The pattern is clear, Hayes said over the communication system. The Ravagers are testing our defenses. They're trying to figure out how these new weapons work. Jake held his sword and felt it pulse with warm energy. Through their link, he could sense something like urgency from the weapon. It wanted to be used. It wanted to fight. They're not just testing our defenses, Jake said. They're looking for something. Zar's dream showed that they've been hunting these weapons for a long time. What do you think they want? Commander Grant asked. Jake closed his eyes and let the sword show him more visions from the Meridian. He saw the ship's final battle, the crew's desperate plan to hide their weapons, and something else. A location where the most important weapon was hidden. There's a place, Jake said slowly. Somewhere the Meridian crew hid their most powerful weapons. The Ravagers know about it, and they're trying to force us to lead them there. He opened his eyes and looked at the others. They're not really trying to conquer our colonies. They're trying to make us desperate enough to gather all the weapon users in one place. Elder Blackwood's face went pale. It's a trap, yes, Jake said. But it might also be our only chance to end this. The sword is showing me images of weapons that could stop the Ravagers for good. But we'd have to go to the place they want us. To go, Zara took Jake's free hand. Then we go. Keth always said that sometimes the only way to win is to walk into the trap and turn it around. Jake squeezed her hand and felt the sword pulse with agreement. The weapon had been waiting 200 years for this moment. Now it was time to finish what the Meridian crew had started. The message came through space on an old frequency that hadn't been used in 200 years. Jake was in the colony's communications center when Amy Clark picked up the signal. Her face went white as she listened to the transmission. Shh, Jake, you need to hear this, Amy said, her voice shaking. The voice that came through the speakers was deep and cold, speaking perfect English with no accent at all. Human warriors who carry the ghost blades of the Meridian. I am Vexstar, the Destroyer, commander of the Ravager Horde. I know you can hear this message. Jake felt his sword pulse with angry energy from where it hung at his side. The weapon seemed to recognize the voice like an old enemy calling from across time. Your people interest me, Vexstar continued. 200 years ago, the crew of your ship Meridian gave my forces more trouble than entire alien fleets. They fought in ways we could not predict or understand. Even when they were dying, they found ways to hurt us. Commander Grant and Captain Hayes rushed into the communication center as the message continued. Both of them looked grim. We have studied your people since then, Vexstar said. We have watched your colonies spread across the stars. We have learned your languages and your tactics. But there is still something about humans that we cannot grasp. something that makes you dangerous in ways other species are not. The message paused, and Jake could hear strange sounds in the background. Metal grinding against metal, and voices speaking in languages that hurt to listen to. The weapons your Meridian crew scattered across the galaxy are awakening. We know this because we can sense them. Each time one of you picks up a ghost blade, it sends out a signal that we can track. You have made it very easy for us to find you. Jake's blood turned cold. Every time he used the sword, he had been broadcasting his location to the enemy. But we do not wish to simply destroy you, Vexstar continued. That would be wasteful. Instead, we offer you a choice. Bring all of your Ghostblade warriors to the coordinates I am transmitting now. Face us in honorable combat. You can defeat us, we will leave human space, and never return. Amy's computer screen showed a star. Map with a red dot marking a location in the outer rim of human territory. Jake recognized the system from his sword's visions. It was where the Meridian had made its final stand. If you refuse our challenge, Vexstar said, we will hunt down every human colony one by one. We will take your people and your technology. And in the end, we will find all the Ghost Blades anyway. The choice is yours. You have 7 days. The transmission ended, leaving the communication center in dead silence. Jake could feel his sword humming with something that felt like excitement mixed with dread. It's a trap, Commander Grant said. He wants us to gather all our weapon users in one place, so he can destroy them all at once. Captain Hayes nodded. The tactical situation is impossible. We have maybe 12 people who can use these weapons properly. He probably has thousands of ships. But Elder Blackwood, who had been listening quietly in the corner, shook his head. Maybe that's not the point. My grandfather's journal mentioned something about the place where the Meridian was lost. There. Were things there, weapons and technology, that the crew couldn't get to their hiding places before the ship was destroyed? Jake closed his eyes and let his sword show him more visions. He saw the final battle of the Meridian, but this time he paid attention to details he had missed before. The human ship wasn't just fighting to survive. It was trying to reach something. A station or facility hidden in the asteroid field where the battle took place. There's something at those coordinates, Jake said. Something the Meridian crew was trying to protect. Maybe something powerful enough to actually stop the Ravagers. Or maybe it's exactly what Vexstar wants, Grant said. Maybe he's using us to get to whatever the Meridian crew was hiding. Zara spoke up from where she had been standing by the door. Keth always said that sometimes you have to take a risk to save what matters most. If we don't go, the Ravagers will just keep attacking human colonies until they find what they're looking for anyway. Over the next 3 days, human ships arrived at New Haven from across the Colonial Defense Network. Jake met the other Ghost Blade warriors, and he was surprised by how normal they seemed. There was Maria Santos, a mining engineer from the Kepler system. Tom Bradley, a ship mechanic from the orbital yards around Mars. Lisa Wong, a communications specialist from the frontier colonies. Each of them carried a weapon like Jake's. Each weapon was slightly different. Maria's sword was broader and heavier, designed for breaking through armor. Tom's was thinner and more flexible, perfect for fighting in tight spaces. Lisa's weapon could split into 2 smaller blades that moved like they were dancing. But they all had one thing in common. When they held their weapons, their eyes got a distant look, like they were seeing things that weren't there. The swords were showing them tactics and strategies, teaching them how to fight like the crew of the Meridian. The weapons are connected, Jake realized as he watched the others train. They're sharing information with each other. Everything one of us learns, the others can access to. Elder Blackwood spent hours working with each weapon user, teaching them fighting techniques his grandfather had learned from Meridian survivors. The old man was too weak to fight himself, but his knowledge was precious. The key is not to fight like the aliens expect, Blackwood explained. They think in terms of overwhelming force or perfect coordination. Humans are different. We improvise. Find ways to win that nobody else would think of. Captain Hayes gathered intelligence on the meeting location while the weapon users trained. What he found was not encouraging. The asteroid field where the Meridian was lost is enormous, Hayes reported. Thousands of rocks, some as big as small moons. perfect place for an ambush. Vexstar could hide his entire fleet in there. But it's also perfect for us, Jake said. The asteroids will break up his formations, make it harder for him to use his numbers advantage. The night before they were supposed to leave for the meeting, Jake and Zara sat outside their house, looking up at the stars. The sword lay across Jake's knees, its glow dimmed to a soft blue light. "Are you scared?" Zara asked. Terrified, Jake admitted. 3 days ago, I was just an engineer who fixed water pumps and air recyclers. I'm supposed to help save humanity from an alien invasion. Zara took his hand. Keth was scared too, before his final battle. But he told me that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what needs to be done, even when you are afraid. Jake lifted the sword and felt its warm presence in his mind. Through their connection, he could sense the other weapon users across the colony. They were all scared, but they were all ready to fight. The Meridian crew knew this day would come, Jake said. They made these weapons because they knew humans would need them someday. We can't let their sacrifice be for nothing. The next morning, the small human fleet lifted off from New Haven. 12 weapon users, 100 regular soldiers, and 6 ships against an enemy that had conquered most of the galaxy. The odds were impossible. But Jake found that he wasn't thinking about the odds anymore. The sword was showing him something else. A vision of the hidden facility the Meridian crew had died trying to reach. And in that facility, weapons that could change everything if they could get there alive. The asteroid field where the Meridian had died looked like a graveyard in space. Broken rocks drifted in the darkness, some still glowing with radiation from the ancient battle. Jake stood on the bridge of Captain Hayes' ship, watching the debris. Field grow larger as they approached. "Sensor contacts," reported the ship's officer. "Lots of them. Ravager vessels are already here, just like we expected." Through the view screen, Jake could see the dark shapes of enemy ships hiding among the asteroids. They were ugly things, all sharp angles and black metal, like they had been built to cause fear as much as destruction. "How many?" Captain Hayes asked. "At least 50 ships that we can detect. Probably more, hiding deeper in the field." Jake felt his sword pulse with anticipation. The weapon was eager for battle, sharing its excitement with the other ghost blades through their connection. He could sense Maria Santos on another ship, her broader sword humming with readiness. Tom Bradley was checking his flexible weapon one last time. All 12 human warriors were ready. Their haze pointed to a massive asteroid in the center of the field. That has to be where the Meridian facility is hidden. The rock is too perfect. To round, it's artificial. Jake's sword showed him flashes of memory from 200 years ago. The Meridian crew fighting desperately to reach that same asteroid. Captain Sarah Chen giving orders to hide the most powerful weapons before the ship was destroyed. A voice crackled over the communication system. It was Vexstar speaking directly to them. So the humans have come after all. 12 warriors with ancient weapons against the might of the Ravager horde. Do you truly believe you can succeed where an entire ship failed? Jake took the microphone from Hayes. "We're here. Let's finish this." Vexstar laughed, a sound like metal scraping against stone. "Very well, but first let me show you something." The largest Ravager ship moved out from behind an asteroid. It was enormous, easily 10 times the size of the human vessels. Along its hull, Jake could see the wreckage of other ships welded to the armor like trophies. Human ships, alien vessels, entire space stations that had been torn apart and added to the monster. "Each piece you see represents a victory," Vexstar said. "A species that thought they could resist us. Your Meridian is there too, what little we could recover after the battle." Jake felt anger flowed through him, but the sword helped him stay calm. Getting mad would not help anyone win this fight. "The rules are simple," Vexstar continued. "Single combat between champions, as your species seems to prefer. If your warriors can defeat mine, we will leave human space forever. If we win, your people become part of our collection. And if we refuse," Az asked, "then we destroy you here and now and continue hunting your colonies one by one." The human ships moved deeper into the asteroid field. Jake could see Ravager vessels following them, but keeping their distance. This was going to be a fight between the Ghostblade, warriors, and whatever champions Vexstar had chosen. They landed on the artificial asteroid. Jake was amazed by what they found. The entire interior had been carved out and turned into a massive facility. Ancient human technology lined the walls. Dormant for 2 centuries, but still functioning, in the center of the facility stood 12 pedestals arranged in a circle. 11 of them held weapons like the ghost blades, but these were different. Larger, more complex, humming with power that made Jake's sword seem simple by comparison. The 12th pedestal was empty. The master weapon, Elder Blackwood said over. The radio from the ship, my grandfather's journal mentioned it. The weapon designed to command all the others. Jake looked at his sword and understood. His blade was not just one of the scattered weapons from the Meridian. It was the key that could unlock the others. But before they could reach the weapons, Ravager warriors began materializing around them, not arriving in ships, but teleporting directly into the facility. 12 of them, each one different but all. Radiating the same cold menace, Vexstar appeared last, in the center of the circle. He was tall and thin like the other Ravagers, but his armor was covered with symbols that seemed to move and writhe. In his hands he carried a weapon that Jake recognized from his sword's memories. It was a ghost blade, but one that had been corrupted and changed. Surprised? Vexstar asked. We have studied your weapons for 200 years. We learned to make our own versions, better versions. The battle began without warning. The Ravager champions moved faster than anything Jake had ever seen, but the Ghostblade warriors were ready. The weapons guided their users, showing them how to fight enemies that should have been impossible to defeat. Maria Santos fought a Ravager that could split into multiple copies of itself, her heavy sword cutting. Through the illusions to find the real enemy, Tom Bradley battled a creature that could turn its body into liquid metal, his flexible weapon wrapping around it like a net. Jake found himself facing Vexstar directly. The Ravager leader was incredibly skilled, his corrupted blade matching Jake's. Weapon strike for strike. There was something wrong with the way he fought. His moves were perfect, but they followed patterns. He had learned human fighting techniques, but he did not understand them. You fight like a machine, Jake said, ducking under a strike that would have taken his head off. You copied our tactics, but you missed the point. Vexstar snarled and attacked faster, but Jake was already moving. The Ghost Blade showed him something the Ravager leader had not expected. Instead of fighting back, Jake ran toward the empty pedestal in the center of the room. Humans do not just follow patterns, Jake called over his shoulder. We break them. He reached the pedestal and pressed his sword against the empty mounting. Immediately, all 12 master weapons came to life, their light filling the chamber. But more than that, Jake could suddenly sense every ghost blade in human space. Hundreds of them hidden on dozens of worlds, all waiting for this moment. Through the connection, Jake sent a single command to every weapon. Not an order to attack or defend, but something simpler, something human, adapt across the galaxy. Humans who had never held a ghost blade suddenly found themselves able to use the weapons. The swords chose new warriors, people who thought in ways the Ravagers could never understand. Engineers and farmers, teachers and artists, all united by the human ability to find new solutions to impossible problems. On the asteroid, the tide of battle turned. The Ravager champions found themselves facing opponents who no longer fought by any rules they recognized. Jake's sword grew brighter as he fought Vexstar, and he realized that the weapon was not just teaching him anymore. It was learning from him. This is impossible, Vexstar said, his perfect technique beginning to fall apart as Jake fought in ways that made no tactical sense. Your species is primitive. You should not be able to resist us. That's your problem, Jake said, finally landing a blow that shattered Vexstar's corrupted blade. You think there's only one way to be strong? But humans know that sometimes the best solution is the one nobody expects. He pointed his sword at the Ravager leader's throat. Around the chamber, the other Ghostblade warriors had defeated their opponents using tactics that would have made military instructors shake their heads in disbelief. Vexstar stared at Jake with something that might have been respect. You have won this battle, human, but the war is not over. There are others like me, other Ravager fleets. Then they can learn the same lesson you did, Jake said. Humans are not going anywhere, and we do not give up. Vexstar and his surviving warriors disappeared, teleporting back to their ships. Within minutes, the entire Ravager fleet was jumping away from the asteroid field. Retreating deeper into unknown space, Jake stood in the ancient facility, surrounded by weapons that hummed with satisfied energy. Through his connection to the Ghostblade network, he could feel humans across the galaxy picking up weapons and joining the fight. The Ravagers had made humanity stronger by trying to destroy it. Zara's voice came over the radio from the ship. "Jake, are you all right?" He looked at his sword, which was glowing more softly now, like it was finally at peace. "I'm fine. We all are. And I think the Meridian crew would be proud of what we did here today." Captain Hayes called for pickup ships to evacuate the facility, but Jake knew they would be back. The ancient human base would become a training center, a place where new Ghostblade warriors could learn to fight in ways the galaxy had never seen before. As they flew away from the asteroid field, Jake sat with Zara and watched the stars through the view screen. The war with the Ravagers was far from over, but for the first time, humans had weapons that could match their enemies. More than that, they had something the Ravagers could never understand or defeat. They had each other and the human ability to find hope even in the darkest places. The Ghostblades sang softly in their sheaths, ready for whatever came next.